I definitely didn't know how strong I was, how resilient I was. I mean, I say it all the time, like, my ancestors were so resilient, but like, I never applied that to myself. Now I can look back on the experience that I went through and the fact that I came out of it still the light that I was before it
Yeah.
shows the resilience. And I'm like, wow, it was always in me. I hate sometimes that it took something so traumatic for me to see it within myself, and it brought me closer to myself and to God than I had ever been.
You're stronger than you know. Welcome to the Jewels Inside podcast, and I am your host, Elvie Schooley. Ta-da! Today we are speaking with Micah Briggs. Micah is a multidisciplinary visual artist, designer, and founder of 4XA, which is a creative studio dedicated to storytelling through fine art, illustrations, and graphic designs. She's based in Birmingham, Alabama. Her work exists at the intersection of surrealism and magical realism, where she blends history, culture, and personal narratives into a visual, striking composition. Her work has been exhibited in institutions such as the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, and she has collaborated with cultural organizations to develop impactful visual experiences. Welcome, Micah Briggs.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, you're very, I love your bio.
Thank you.
And knowing you, this is like a very, very nice narrative about who you are and all of the work that you're doing creatively. So, the Jewels Inside podcast is an exploratory experience of conversation where we talk about a subject matter. And today's topic is called, Should Love Be Toxic? And today's intention is I want the audience to walk away with a self-care practice that they can implement into their lives for their own process of beginning to tap inside so that they can grow, nurture themselves, and then reimagine their life the way you have.
I love that.
Awesome. So why don't we begin with, tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay.
A brief edition, whatever feels comfortable with you.
Okay.
And how did it help you make a shift in your life? Now finding where you are as an artist who's been featured in the Smithsonian and a single mom with an amazing little one. So, yeah.
Okay, where do I start? Well, art for me, I think, has always been a part of my life and has been what has helped me navigate the world in my life. This chapter of my story started in college. I think I was a sophomore, and I ran into someone, and we quickly became friends and got into a relationship. And it was a good time initially. And then slowly started turning into something else, which there's so many journeys within the one journey. It's so many things. And as I'm saying it, I'm like reflecting. I had lots of warnings, none that I listened to. I was very sure that I knew what I was doing at a young age of 19 years old. I felt like I had the whole world figured out. And now that's something I think about a lot, not living my life based on necessarily what I want, but more so releasing myself to a higher purpose and the will of the greater good, if that makes sense. And I think me not having the most confidence in who I was as a person, my gifts, a lot of different things, I allowed myself to kind of give up all of who I was at that time to someone else, in a way to where I didn't realize until after a lot of who I became was very thoughtfully curated by the other person, whether it was what I ate, the way that I thought, the way that I dressed, whether I was the friends that I had or didn't have, the family that I had or didn't have. So that was a very interesting experience. It was a very tumultuous experience, lots of ups and downs, lots of chaos and violence. And I think at some point that just became normal for me, which I eventually learned was the patterns. One of the patterns of abuse is, it's like in movies, we assume like it's just going to come immediately. Like if on day one I wasn't being abused, why 3 years from now would I be being abused? Like, but I didn't realize the process, because even that was a process. It started out with, love bombing, which now I have the vocabulary. I didn't have the vocabulary at the time. Love bombing, lots of gifts, lots of, you were my queen, you're amazing, you're so, I'm going to raise you up so high. And so that's what I thought that person was. And you truly care. And then I was brought down to nothing. So then it was, you're worthless, you're a mistake, why are you here? Everything you do is wrong. Just beating me down till I felt like I was worthless. And I already had kind of a low self-esteem, so it wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't that hard, but it may not have been that hard to convince me at that time that I wasn't worth much. So it went from that to then threats, but I'm like, oh, I know you. You would never. And then it went from that to, a slap or a shove, to then it's full on shattered rib cages, bloody eyes, fractured wrist, lots of things. And at that point, I was so isolated and convinced that I deserved everything I was receiving that it was really hard to leave. It was very hard. And the only thing that woke me up was getting pregnant. Even through my pregnancy, I suffered a lot of abuse. Towards the end, the last weeks, hemorrhages, fractured rib cages. I went to the delivery room with a black eye that I had to cover up with sunglasses and makeup and hair. And even then, you were the first person I came to. My family wasn't there when I had my baby. I was just embarrassed, and I didn't want to hear the "I told you so," which never happened. But in my mind, I felt so isolated, and no one could possibly understand what I'm going through. So that kind of kept me, that thinking is what kept me in the relationship for so long. And then I already knew you, but I think we became very close during that time, and I stayed on the farm. And Novin, my daughter, as you know, I remember one night, it was extremely violent, and the person just straight up said, I was instructed to kill you. And I was like, no, there's no way. And everything that night led up to me almost dying. And I remember quite vividly my daughter laying on the mattress in the bedroom where I was being assaulted. And she just started crying. And I looked her in her eyes and I was like, she deserves more. So before I even thought I deserved more, I knew she deserved more. And I was like, I would never want her to experience this. I can't be that example for her. And so it took 3 times of me physically leaving before I stayed away. And even then, I was still a little emotionally connected. It took a lot of time to disconnect myself. And even once I did that, then it was anger, resentment. Why would I allow this to happen to myself? Lots of confusion, a little bit of self-hate. And it took a lot of work. During that period, I did not create a single piece of artwork.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was extremely depressed. I've learned to connect my emotions. Usually when I'm feeling in a very depressed state, despite all the other things I was going through, it's usually when I'm not doing things in alignment with my purpose and my gifts. That's when I feel the worst. I even had an experience a few weeks ago. I was feeling so down and I was just not myself. And I was like, what is this? And I was like, I'm not moving in alignment right now. And as soon as I made that shift mentally, everything else corrected itself. It was like everything just flew off of me. And so, my daughter first, God, and art really saved my life and has kept me going for sure.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Mm-hmm.
I know that some of that was really difficult. And I want to honor your vulnerability.
I remember even then things that I'd never experienced before, like literally physically being crippled by anxiety. Obviously I was in a very traumatic space. So it was very much fight or flight for me. But it would literally, I can't move. Like I would be stuck.
So what was a self-care thing that you used or
I didn't have one.
Skill. Oh, okay.
I didn't have one. It was mostly survival.
Yeah.
To be honest. And I didn't realize that in the moment. But no, I had nothing because there are multiple attempts I made on my life. Like it was literally God. I think about it all the time, how I made it through that. And it was 5 years of my life, which is crazy to say.
Did you lean in heavy on your prayers and your faith?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was always raised in a very spiritual home, but I was not connected at all. I always received downloads. That never stopped. The creativity never stopped. I did a lot of journaling. I still have my journals from those times. Lots of drawings, lots of paintings that could be. I'm in the process of making some of those. But I never, the self-care practices did not come till after.
Yeah.
They came after.
When you mentioned journaling
Yeah.
is a self-care practice that I have used for many years in my own process of healing and growth.
Yeah.
And so
that was
even
a
though
form.
You may not have coined that term and recognize it.
Like I'm doing
self-care.
this for self-care. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is because it's a continuous process of doing the journaling and allowing yourself to explore your emotions and express your gratitude and talk about your day. That's the practice.
That is true. Because I think the hardest thing for me to actually read sometimes, even today, because I found my journals in my closet, the very back part of my closet, and I decided to open them up. The hardest part for me, honestly, is how positive I was. That was scary. Because I'm like, how is that possible?
But do
you're
you
going
see
through.
that as a resilient factor?
I think so.
Yeah.
And it's a good trait to have. I would beat myself up over it though. I'm like, how are you so positive and nice all the time? In like the darkest, to people who don't deserve it, I felt like in that moment. Because yeah, in my journal, I'm like, thank you, God, for a new day. Thank you, God, for my husband who must love me, even though like he totally punched me in the face yesterday. Like, so like, but like in my journal, nowhere do I talk about the abuse. If I do, it's like, oh, wow, it was a rough day, but I know we'll get through it and tomorrow will be better. I never once said like what happened. Now I have medical record. I have my memories, but I never wrote it down, which is interesting.
Well, maybe your journaling was really about expressing the positive things that you were internalizing, that you were being able to latch onto in those
Probably
moments
kept me
of
going.
darkness,
Yeah.
which helped you to stay into the game of your life and not succumb to the darkness of
I like
your
that.
depression.
Yeah.
And then the attempts that you mentioned about taking your own life, so that's a wonderful tool that you have. I can't express enough to clients the need for a journaling practice.
It helps a lot.
Yeah.
Even just to reflect is helpful too. I really appreciate that I can go back and look, because I've learned after the grieving process, which me and you talked about a lot, of like grieving that person that I used to be.
Yeah.
Because I'm very much not her anymore.
Right.
And I've learned that two things can exist at once. I think that's also something you taught me, even though it was very painful. There were some good times, and I do realize that, a lot of my own decisions got me in that situation, but it grew me in a way that I can honestly say I probably would have never grown without it.
Yeah.
And so that was hard. It used to be hard for me to say that because I'm like, I don't want it to be misinterpreted like someone thinks I'm condoning the violence I experienced, because I'm not at all. But me just reflecting where I once was very insecure, very passive, very quiet, very people-pleasing, it unlocked a voice in me that was always there, but I never really was in tune with. And it also, when you talked about earlier being connected to more, I've always felt connected to more, but it made me realize how much of a trick it is that we're isolated, but so much of us feel isolated when really we're so connected,
Right.
but we don't share authentically or in a vulnerable way, so we would never know.
Right. And our society really does celebrate the individualistic success of whoever. However, the rest of the world is not necessarily lived through the lens that we live life through here in the United States.
Right.
And spiritually speaking, as well as scientifically speaking, we all long to be connected to each other. When we have these periods where we feel depressed and isolated, it's because we are isolated away from our support network.
Yeah.
That's why community spaces, supportive networks
Very important.
are so important to our growth, our stability, and our process of healing.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing those vital parts of your life, and I know it's really delicate.
Yeah.
But I want to also highlight you spoke about two things: self-reflection, and then you spoke about giving away your power and recognizing that you gave away your power. So I want to have a disclaimer here. We are not condoning violence and abuse. But what we are talking about is someone having the realization of what she needed to do to take back her power, to no longer coexist in an abusive relationship. Very different. So just so that the audience is really clear about what's happening here in this conversation, because this is a very delicate subject matter. When we talk about self-reflection, which I advocate for completely, self-reflection is our ability to remember our experiences, write about it. I advocate for writing. Journaling is the ticket forward. And in the process of writing about what we have experienced, there's this magic that happens. One, with the hands are actually writing.
Yes, definitely.
It's giving it life form. And two, when we begin to really explore our emotions and put them into words, we're taking back our power for those emotions to no longer cripple us in the process of the hurt.
Yeah.
And that's really essential to know where you have power in the moment. So self-reflection is a powerful tool. And I recently learned this from listening to a podcast with Michael Beckwith and Shai Tavali, talking about self-reflection only begins to happen when we become self-aware.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
That's good.
That's
Like
huge
that.
because oftentimes people think, oh, I'm not self-aware and I'm just this. But what they're saying is that the ability to reflect on what you have experienced does line up with you having some awareness. So we're not all starting from this 0.0 place when we begin to look at where we are versus where we want to go and what the future we want to create for ourselves. And so you've been through this journey and you've created now this amazing platform for yourself. You have a beautiful story, and I know that you have a book that you've already written.
Yes.
But I think that there's so much more to the potential story here about your experience.
Definitely.
That you can share with other women, because my lived experience of an unhealthy marriage, there was verbal, emotional, and spiritual abuse. And when I walked away from my 15-year marriage, I realized that this journey that I had experienced was bigger than me.
Yes.
Because I actually prayed before I left. I felt so at peace when I walked away and said the words. I didn't even know who that was.
Yeah.
When I said the words, I was like, who said that? Because I didn't recognize the depth of my peace. Because I had worked through so much to arrive at the place of knowing, okay, it's time to go.
Yeah.
And so when we've gone through things, it's not really about us.
Yeah.
Because if we've been doing the work of self-reflection, doing the work of exploring what we experienced in a way to extract the wisdom, then we have something that we can offer others.
Definitely. I joined a support group for women in domestic violence situations. Some women were still in their situation, and it was almost dangerous for them to even be on the call trying to do something that they were doing. Some of us were already out. Some had been out for years. I was like freshly out of the relationship. And it was the craziest thing for me was when people finally got comfortable enough to share, everybody's story sounded the exact same. I was like, wait, were you married to him too? Like, what? We were all like 50 of us on the call were married to the same person. Like, it was crazy. But that, like, as much as I joked about it, it was just that revelation of like, wow, all different people, all different walks of life, different relationships. But there were lots of commonalities, lots of patterns. And so we could all give advice to each other at whatever point that we were in at that time. But that's what made me realize, okay, this is bigger. Yeah. There are lots of people going through this experience, men included. A lot of men don't talk about their experiences, but there are just as many men as there are women. But we don't talk about it often. A lot of us, we're just quiet about it. And even in our communities, sometimes we're just like, that's just how it is. My grandmother experienced abuse. And I think I knew about it, but I didn't really process it until I escaped my own toxic relationship. And I was like, I can't imagine what she went through.
Wow.
Because even then, I talked to my therapist about it a lot. A lot of our ancestors didn't have the ability to do that self-care. They didn't have the ability to walk away. They had to be strong.
Yeah.
They couldn't cry. They couldn't. And I think sometimes we expect, even to this day, like we have to keep that. We have to maintain that. And it's like, no. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't have had it. It's almost like I talk to my grandmother all the time. I'm like, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Not just that you experienced that, but that you couldn't talk to anyone. She had so many children. She just had to take care of them. Yeah. She couldn't pause and process. And then she passed away. Like, she never, I don't think, ever got the opportunity. And that really sucks. But that's why also, even what I'm doing now, I feel like part of that is for them too.
That's right. Yeah. We have a responsibility when we recognize a pattern that is a part of our lineage, our ancestral history, to interrupt that pattern, especially if it is not adding to the value of our human experience. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you spoke about was we don't talk about it. Yeah. When I was growing up, I distinctively remember someone saying, well, we as Black people, we don't do stuff like that. And okay, here I am as a child. Yeah. So, all right, that's something that we don't do. Yeah. However, mental health is imperative.
To everyone.
For everyone. And now there are so many ways in which we can access support for our mental health. Yes. We are busy on our phones all day long, and it's really, really easy to have an online therapist now, to create that opportunity where we can have someone support us. So I'm very happy to hear that you have a therapist.
Yes, and she's virtual.
Awesome.
Her online. She's amazing.
Awesome.
And I think I tell people all the time, if the first experience isn't great, keep trying with new people, because the first few therapists, I'll be very honest, they weren't like me. They just very different experiences. My current therapist is a Black woman, single mom. She has a lot of similarities to me.
Awesome.
And that made all the difference in the world, honestly. Because whereas some women who culturally weren't similar to me, I'm trying to figure out how to say it.
The language.
Yes. But they looked at me and they're like, you're okay, you'll be fine. And I was like, no. Yeah. I need more than that. They'd listen, but they couldn't relate. And I found someone, she didn't have all the same lived experiences as me, but because even the faith piece, like we were able to, lots of similarities, and it helped, and it made all the difference in the world for me. But that was my third therapist.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is finding a relationship, someone that you can actually feel like you can open up to, and that they actually see you.
Yes, and they care.
They care.
But they're clinically trained, so they
Yeah.
so they can give good advice. Because I also learned, I love going to my friends and my family.
Right.
But there are limitations there too. And sometimes you need to have someone third party, unbiased, who aren't connected to you in that way, who can see your blind spots.
That's right.
Who can help you process, because someone asked me the other day, like, what was the process like? And I was like, the beginning was definitely, I had to catch her up because I had been through a lot. Like we were just sitting there talking. And even just in those beginning stages, she wasn't necessarily like, okay, here's my advice for you. But me talking out loud to someone listening without any judgment, I started piecing together dots. I was like, wait, did I just say that? Oh, wait. Like, it just started connecting for me. And then did you think about this? Well, what about this? Or I noticed something you just said. You said it very quickly and you may not have caught it. Let's go back real quick and stay here for a second. All of that helps in a way that sometimes our family and our friends can't do for us.
And I'll add, oftentimes our families are too close to the problem.
Yes, very much so.
Family can be the supportive network, which I advocate as something that we all need to have around us.
Yes.
Is a space where we can, or a group of people that we can go into a space, feel like we are being seen, we're being heard, that can support you through that process. However, having a therapist is essential. Yeah. I have a master's in social work, and I'm a licensed here in Alabama and in Texas. However, my services are not for clinical. It's designed for administrative and leadership. And so I love what I get to do in supporting people and advocating for my colleagues as clinical social workers to fill in those gaps where people need the mental help that they need. Yes. I wanted to step back a little bit, and and if you're ready to answer this question, you can. But you spoke about the revelations that you had with your therapist and putting the pieces together. What is one of the jewels inside of your lived experiences that you have, that aha moment that you've already found? And I think that when we go through experiences like yours and you continue to unpack, those revelations will come. Yeah. But that's part of what my program is about, is understanding what the jewels are with what we've experienced that really helps us to see our purpose.
Yes. I think a big one, which I kind of identified through multiple different experiences in the one greater experience, would be my strength. I definitely didn't know how strong I was, how resilient I was. I mean, I say it all the time, like, my ancestors were so resilient. But, like, I never applied that to myself. Yeah. Childbirth was definitely the first time I was like, oh, my God. Like, whoa, I did that. Like, because I was honestly always terrified. Like, I wanted to be a mom, but I didn't want to give birth. Like, that's scary. That is very scary. And like you said earlier, breath, the power in breathing, I was dead set. I do not have a high pain tolerance, or so I thought. And I was like, I'm going to learn how to do this pain-free. I didn't even know that was possible because they don't teach us that. I was like, I'm going to do all the research. I know it's possible. And I was saying pain-free births. And it's not that you don't feel it or you don't feel discomfort, because that's always going to be there. It's kind of like a metaphor for life. It's always going to be there at some point in your life. But it was about how I chose to experience it.
Yeah.
So I focused on my breath the entire time. I had a little comb, a wooden comb in my hand that I would squeeze when contractions got super bad. But no drugs, no nothing. Like, I got that baby out. I was, like, very impressed with myself. But I was like, the breath was the biggest thing. When I learned how to actually breathe, not strain, not, like, give all my energy to the pain and give it to my breath, that's where the strength was. And just reflecting on that, and then now I can look back on the experience that I went through and the fact that I came out of it still the light that I was before it. Yeah. Shows the resilience. And I'm like, wow, it was always in me. I hate sometimes that it took something so traumatic for me to see it within myself, but
right.
That's, for me, what happened in order for me to see who I was. And it brought me closer to myself and to God than I had ever been. So that was beautiful for me.
So the jewels inside of this is you discovered your resilience factor.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
Because art was, I could say, almost like a mask for me in a way. Like, I express through art. I use art to express things that maybe I wasn't so confident to say out loud, but I could put in my art. And people don't always even see the hidden message within a lot of things. They're just like, oh, that's a beautiful portrait. I'm like, but if you really knew what's behind that beautiful portrait, it's usually a deeper meaning to all of my artwork. But, I mean, there are instances where I'd be in a gallery setting where I'm at a show, and I paint huge works. Like, some of the paintings that I would show back in the day, like 6 foot by 5 foot, huge, massive, bigger than me. And they would be of me. Like, I paint a lot of self-portraits. So it'd be my face. And people would be like, oh, my God, who did that? And I'd just be there. And in the relationship I was in, a lot of times people, because he had the bigger, more dominant personality, they would assume he was the artist. Wow. And back then, I did not have the courage to say, no, that was me. I just let it be what it was.
Oh, so you played small.
Yeah, always. Yeah, always. I never allowed myself to be seen. I had a fear of being seen, for sure. And so I definitely had to. That's one thing I shed coming out of it.
Good.
I think my throat chakra has developed quite a bit. I discovered my voice. That was a big jewel that I found.
I have a voice.
Yes, and I need to use it.
Awesome.
In lots of different ways, I'm still figuring that out and learning that. I feel like it's constantly being exposed to me.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to listen.
Oh.
Yeah.
Good. So now you've spoken about 3 things that I teach about. Self-reflection, you've mentioned that. Breathing, being able to tap and connect to your breath and use it as a resource.
Even in my art practice, I realized at some point, I in the past didn't breathe. Like,
wow.
When I paint, it's weird. And I didn't recognize it until I had a few faintings. But, like, I fainted a few times in the middle of painting. I was like, what is wrong with me? I realized I was not properly breathing, like, almost like holding my breath in certain periods of painting.
Wow.
It's crazy. And I recognized I almost did it the other day because I just get so focused, especially in, like, small details, that I'm, like, holding my breath. And I was like, no, breathe in, breathe out. Because even art, especially when you're painting on a large scale, they teach you that the paintbrush is an extension of your body. You're not supposed to be here with it, with your hand. You use your arms, like your full entire body, to create with, which that's one of the techniques that I put into the book, because I think that alone is a mindfulness practice. And I tell people all the time, and I had to learn to tell myself, we get so caught up sometimes in the products that we want, like the finished thing, that we don't experience or allow ourselves to experience the lessons of the journey and the getting there. Kind of with everything in life, but especially with art, when I was like, this can be a mindfulness practice and not just I'm creating to have this end result. I think that's where the beauty lies, especially for people who may not identify as an artist.
Right. Beautiful. I love the way you articulated that.
Thank you.
Yes. Let me piggyback to the third thing that you have spoken about is you allowed yourself to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
And that is a beautiful self-care, self-love practice. And forgiveness is not, even for my own journey of remembering the challenges that I went through when I was younger with my first husband, I find myself still having to sit with and practice that forgiveness and not judge, not criticize, not feel shame, because that lesson and that part of my journey taught me something more about why I'm here and what I have to offer the world.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to hear that you have self-reflection, you have breathing techniques that you use and you incorporate in your life, and you also practice forgiveness with yourself, because those three things are essential to coming into a place in your life where you can feel that you are thriving.
Yes.
Without them, you can stay stuck in a place of anxiety, sadness, depression, all of those things that don't allow us to feel like happiness and joy in our life, which I honestly have come to believe and value so much that I purposefully find moments and things that bring me joy and make sure that I engage in them, because the quality of living, the quality of the life that we exist and have is really determined by those simple moments.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not these other things that, our society is really big on, and the glamorization of materialized identity. Well, I'm just not that girl.
Yeah.
But when you want to talk about things that bring you joy in life, now we're talking about a spiritual practice. And that's what I think your art in the book that you have written is really about. So would you like to share it with the audience?
A journey of healing through art and creativity. And the book's called The Art of Healing.
Beautiful.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what will people who buy your book take away from the experience of interacting with your book?
I think for my book, it is like a first step. It's like a first step of realizing that everyday things can become a meditative practice and a moment of mindfulness. Things that we may overlook or take for granted. And so it kind of just teaches like another way that you can do that. I don't think people use art that often, talk about it as a meditative or mindfulness practice. Fun fact, after I graduated, when my senior year at UAB, I got accepted into Drexel. I was going to go there for grad school to get my master's in art therapy.
Wow.
And due to the nature of my relationship at the time, I deviated and I didn't go through with grad school. But through the lived experience, I kind of returned back to that. And so, yeah, I use a few different techniques. Visualization is one. I love that. I use that in my own life all the time. It's a daily practice for me. And really just my overall creativity. I love doing that. Using repetition also. I wanted this book to really harp on, like what I said earlier, with not going into it with a specific outcome of I'm here to create art, but more so I'm here to use art as a tool to connect with myself, how I'm feeling on the inside, and different paths to healing. Therapy was one that we talked about earlier, journaling, art, and then aromatherapy for me. Those are my 4 things that I use simultaneously. I quickly discovered that it wasn't just one thing was going to completely heal me. Like you say all the time, it had to become like a lifestyle. And so just in everything, whether I'm cooking eggs for breakfast or I'm washing my face, like everything is like, okay, slow down, be here in this moment. And like I can do breath work while I'm cooking. Like, like everything can become a meditative practice. So I have prompts. So it's set up like a sketchbook. So they're blank pages, but there are prompts on the top of each page. And so you go through a guided meditation just to get you grounded and prepared for the moment. And then depending on what section of the journal you're in, there are different meditative mindfulness techniques that you can use.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
I think that this is such a wonderful resource that you've created.
That's what I
wanted.
wanted.
I love the intentionality that you've put into creating the book and what the person who engages with it will walk away with. You really can't say enough about the benefits of mindfulness.
Yeah, you can't. It's something that everyone should incorporate. It's not like this niche thing.
No.
I think part of it being like commercialized, and it's like wellness is one of the largest industries right now. It's very like aesthetic and niche, and it's very, but that sometimes pushes people away because they feel as though I don't fit within that look, that aesthetic of wellness. But it's something that it's a part of all of our lives. And in my bio, I brought up being inspired by my ancestors, and ancestral memory is something that I love to study. And just how certain practices are just ingrained in us. They're just a part of who we are. But we've gotten so far from those things. Herbal medicines, planting, growing, creating, like all of those things I feel like were just so much a part of who we were. And just practicing mindfulness and spirituality in everything that we did. And it's easy to be so distracted and consumed and overwhelmed by the world that we live in that I think sometimes we just feel so disconnected. Right. But I think that's my goal. I know I can't connect every single person, but I'm like, even in I live my life the way that I do to hopefully inspire other people to make decisions, small decisions. It doesn't even have to be huge. Like, we can't all move to a farm, I know. Maybe not everyone even wants to do that, but little things in your life that can bring joy to your life, whatever that looks like. Because it looks different for everyone, too.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Really is. So I have a question for you.
Okay.
What is a value that you have now going forward for either yourself or for your community or for the future, Micah, that may one day be in some other type of relationship?
It's hard to think of that.
And you don't, if you're not ready to answer.
No. I think authenticity and vulnerability are my two big ones.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And embracing discomfort.
Wow.
Because it doesn't necessarily come natural all the time. And I can feel the discomfort and then keep pushing through it. Instead of where I would have stopped and be like paralyzed by the discomfort, I can feel the discomfort and still continue and push forward.
With authenticity?
With authenticity, which is also hard. It's hard to allow yourself to be seen.
Yeah.
Because with that, you open the door for critique, judgment, all the things. But it's getting to a place of knowing who you are and knowing your purpose. And it's like you can have all the opinions in the world. It still hurts sometimes. Yeah. But I know who and whose I am. So I'm good.
And vulnerability, I think vulnerability is...
That's a hard one.
It's difficult. However, I think that it is one of the most beautiful qualities. When I recently went through an ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica, one of the most beautiful things that I saw in the men who attended this retreat was the men who stepped up to be vulnerable, who talked about their fears, who talked about their losses, who took responsibility for the relationships that were no longer a part of their lives, and what they did to contribute to that narrative.
Right.
I think that when we talk about vulnerability, I just feel like it's underrated, but it needs to have its own badge of honor. Yeah. Because vulnerability encompasses authenticity.
Yeah.
And
you
I
have
think
to be vulnerable to be authentic.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. And vice versa.
Yeah.
You know, especially in our society where men are supposed to be the man, and especially men of color.
Yeah.
My brothers.
It's like we write the script and give it to them. You need to follow this.
Oh, no. That is so unnatural.
Yeah.
It's unnatural for a human being to have to carry that forward and leave themselves behind for the sake of society.
Yeah.
Vulnerability. I think it's the most attractive quality in a man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing those values.
Yes, thank you.
So that being said, what do you think about the term of love and how you would want to be loved in the future?
That's a thought daily.
Yeah.
That's something I'm constantly thinking about. Because the truth is, before I never knew.
Oh, interesting.
I never knew. I never had expectations. I never had, I didn't know what I wanted, which is why I don't want to say I went with whatever, but I mean, that's a real thing. And that takes a lot of internal work.
Yeah.
Because you have to be honest with yourself. What do I need? What do I want? But I think one thing that I have kind of figured out is that I want love to be the words we just said: vulnerable, authentic, and a level of emotional intelligence.
Ooh.
Because I didn't even know that word before. And I think I reflected at some point. I was like, I don't have emotional intelligence. And I guess that's not really something we're taught. And it's something I'm constantly working on. And so I was like, I think that's something important for me. I think that's going to be something important when I do decide I want to enter into a relationship again. Emotional intelligence.
Yes.
I want you to, if you need to cry, cry. You know, like, I don't want there to be any fears or stipulations around what you're allowed to feel and can't feel, you know, because that puts up a lot of barriers, especially when we talk about our Black men. There's a lot of those that they didn't necessarily choose, that were kind of given.
Right.
That's something we should teach more. Emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Should be in the curriculum.
It is in the curriculum, people.
Yes.
So I appreciate you answering that question, because the discovery process of the how we want to be loved after we have gone through a traumatic experience of losing love becomes a journey of continuous growth. That's the point, and you spoke to it.
And I think learning how to love yourself, too. I think that was also something I had to figure out. Because it's like you identify, okay, maybe I wasn't loving myself, which also contributed to me staying as long as I did. So then it was, okay, I know that, but like what do I do? Where do I go from here? Yeah. How do I love myself? And again, knowing what you need, not just from someone else, but from yourself.
That's right.
That's like, I used to have fears of being alone. And a lot of people, I think, were uncomfortable with being by ourselves because you're forced to sit there with yourself and like really think. And I really value that now, my alone time and my quiet time. I'm, even when it's uncomfortable, I'm learning how to like sit with that. Like, okay, what do we need right now?
Yes. I appreciate the clarity at which you are able to understand this conversation and the guide of revealing what's going on with Micah and the journey that Micah has gone through. And you've tapped into all of it. Yeah. And this last piece, self-love, because that is the central core problem that allowed you to choose someone in a relationship that continuously fostered, I'm not worthy. Yeah. I'm not worthy. But that was the past. And I'm so happy for you and all of the things that you have incorporated into your life that is a part of your lifestyle, because that's what I really advocate for as a coach is, okay, so we have all these self-care practices, but in reality, what we are cultivating is this is how I'm going to be living my life.
Yes.
It's not optional.
No.
Because I believe we are here to grow.
Yes, always.
Okay, so if we're here to grow, that journey means that every time that you have that moment and you come into this place of self-expansion, you haven't arrived at not anything really other than it's time for the next piece.
Yeah, the next.
It's a journey.
Yep.
You know, we've become very complacent with things being comfortable and easy.
I've been talking about that every day for like the past month.
Yeah.
Yes.
But when we embrace the fact that growth is a normalized part of the journey of the human experience, then we are constantly seeking to grow, whether it's through listening to things like a podcast. I think that needs to be more part of our daily experience than some of the other ways that we use our technology. But what I'm really advocating is that, you know, growth is the human journey, because we, in the process of discovering ourselves, we realize that we are connected to the whole, the one consciousness that there is in the divine. Yes. And we are all part of that. You know, it doesn't matter the texture of your hair, the color of your skin. We are one. And when we remember that and we connect to that, our life really takes on this whole nother level of meaning.
Yeah.
And you have done that work. And I am proud. I'm proud to know you. I'm proud to have witnessed your journey. And I'm proud to be a part of your supportive network in that way.
Thank you.
So tell us, how can we find you? How can we purchase this amazing book? Show it to us once again.
The book is on Amazon. It's available for purchase there. But I do have a website. It is 4xa.org. And that is where you can find my artwork, the book, and a little bit about me and my journey. I try and keep it updated with the new things I have going on.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful. So they can purchase the book. Is there any other way that the audience can follow you? Are you on social media?
Yes. On social media everywhere, my name is Micah, Micah, Althea, Althea.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Micah, for taking this time to be a part of the Jewels Inside podcast and for all that you've shared with us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And my name's Elvie Schooley. You can find me at thejewelsinside.com. And I am available for speaking engagements. Stay tuned for the published book. You're on the podcast, and my coaching services are at thejewelsinside.com. You are more than your lived experiences. You are not defined by them, so learn how to rise above them. You're stronger than